Legislation making next Monday a public holiday to mark the Queen's death was rushed through Parliament under urgency last night. The ACT Party voted against the legislation, and I'm joined by its leader, David Seymour. So why? Why did you vote against?
Well, because it's not necessary to support this holiday paid for by employers up and down New Zealand to honour the Queen. In fact, I would argue it's counterproductive. It's a very strange way to honour a person who worked every day of her life by having a day off. But then you start to think about some of the other impacts. It's not just the 450 million, which is the day in lieu and time and a half that employers are going to have to pay up and down New Zealand. It's also the fact that surgeries are planned about 2 months in advance. There's a massive backlog of medical care post-COVID. One surgery, a GP clinic, 120 appointments cancelled that day. When do you do those? Back of the queue, or do you slot them in? Very difficult to manage. Surgeries, Wairarapa district alone, 488 surgeries cancelled. This is happening all up and down the country in the medical space. And then you get school principals who will say, actually, we've been trying to get kids to actually come to school and catch up on the backlog of learning that's occurred due to 2.5 years of disruption from the government's COVID response. Now the Prime Minister says, hey, kids, take an extra day off. And actually the Monday of the week before they go on 2 weeks of school holiday anyway, this is highly disruptive. And I don't think any of that is what Queen Elizabeth II would have actually approved of.
And we've had, more than 10 days of mourning, the services, everything that's been going on in the United Kingdom. And presumably those people here in New Zealand who've really wanted to mark the Queen's death and show respect have been following that. I mean, I heard of people who would have stayed up late on Monday night watching the funeral all the way through to the end and then taken Tuesday off. In a sense, possibly that's their mark of respect.
Yeah, and look, I think there's an issue around the timing that New Zealand has been behind the world for a long time. Due to the COVID response, we seem to be the last to do everything, and we're going to be last to do this. I mean, the big event, billions of people watched overnight when the Queen had the funeral in London. Now, the Australians are going to have theirs on Thursday. That's a bit late. But New Zealand has to wait till the following Monday when the Prime Minister returns from the United Nations in New York in order to have a New Zealand's memorial, and everyone gets a day off when she's back. And I think it speaks to the problems with this government, that the pageantry and the show are more important than the substance. The substance of this government needs to be pay down debt, raise productivity, get houses built, kids to school, and stop people ram-raiding jewellery stores all the time. Instead, we're going to put more cost onto business to have a holiday, even though it's a week after the rest of the world's moved on.
I mean, I suppose one potential positive of it for, say, retail and those in cafes, restaurants, is that, people on that Monday may well go out shopping, out to a cafe. I mean, may there be a little bit of an upside for some businesses at least?
Well, yeah, maybe for some, but I mean, the Labour Party last night, and to some extent the National Party, were pushing the voodoo economics, that having a public holiday is an economic growth strategy. And I just say to people who believe it's going to add, $100 million to the economy or whatever, well, actually, $1 can only be spent once. A person who goes and buys a coffee or goes to watch a movie at the cinema on this day can't spend that money somewhere else in the economy the next day or any other time, actually. And we've got to get away from this voodoo economic thinking. And the National Party, in fairness, didn't go quite that far down the track. But they did say that they would offer sympathy to employers paying the cost. Well, I just point them back to something Bill English once said to Jacinda Ardern: Kiwis can't go shopping with your values. I'd say to the National Party, small business can't pay their wages with National Party sympathy.
And I mean, reading the Workplace Relations Minister Michael Wood's press statement after the law went through, I mean, it seems to be the government's expectation is that we're all going to sit round and actually follow the memorial service and show our respects to the Queen, rather than actually go shopping or out to the cafes.
Well, the whole thing is very interesting in the sense that I would say most of these Labor folks probably actually lean Republican. I don't think that their monarchism is particularly sincere. It certainly hasn't been on display for most of the Queen's reign, and yet all of a sudden they're prepared to buy into the pomp and circumstance and go along with it. And of course, the second irony, as you point out, is that most people will use it as an opportunity to go shopping and indulge in a bit of capitalism, which usually against, albeit capitalism that is very costly to employers and pays more for workers. So it's really difficult to see where they're coming from here. I mean, just to give you one other little tidbit, Fire and Engineering New Zealand, or Fire and Emergency New Zealand, sorry, they are obviously under huge pressure, haven't been able to pay their fire people enough money to make them happy. They've been going on unprecedented or very rare strikes where they actually refuse to go to an emergency for an hour. And yet this is going to cost Fens $500,000. That's what it costs them for Matariki. So all of a sudden we got an extra $500,000 for the firefighters for this reason. They've been locked in a deadlock and not being able to get enough money for the last few months. It's just a sense of priority is totally wrong.